this gentleman probably needs no introduction, but my name's Tony. I'm a freelance writer here in Seattle. I write about film and music for a couple of different websites, and I am absolutely elated to be talking to you, sir. I'm a big fan of your work, and I mean, everyone here is probably here because of The Greatest American Hero or some of your genre turns in House and a lot of other great movies, but you have 130 films, give or take, credits under your belt.
And a few of them were good.
And I am absolutely delighted to talk about them with you. First thing I wanted to talk about was kind of begin from the beginning. I'm very intrigued about, I mean, you basically grew up in show business, didn't you?
I did. Well, on the outside, my family, my mom and my dad were both actors. So I think that's what you're referring to.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I did grow up, and people often ask me when, at times they say, what was it like growing up in a family with your mom and your dad were both television stars? And I said, well, I didn't know the difference, you know. To me, it was just mom and dad, you know. But it was neat. The best part of growing up in an acting family was that I got to go to set all the time, and I get to play hooky from school. And get on set and drink a cup of coffee with a lot of milk in it, eat donuts, crawl around on the old Mitchell cameras, big cameras, and learn to do the wheels, which they don't do anymore, but I used to do figure eights with the wheels when I was a kid.
Oh, man.
All the big booms, the giant booms, you know, that you see in the old movies.
Wow.
They don't use any of that stuff anymore.
That's little kid heaven, that kind of thing.
It was heaven. It was
That's
heaven.
awesome. Yeah, just if you don't know, do you prefer Bill or William?
Bill.
Bill's mother was actually a co-star on Perry Mason, Barbara Hale. And yeah, she was Della. And your father played Kit Carson on
Correct.
TV.
Let me go further than that. My mom really came from Chicago, Rockford, and she was a model in Chicago. And then she moved out to Los Angeles and was under contract at one of the studios. I think it was RKO. And she worked with Cagney. She worked with Frank Sinatra, and actually she gave Frank Sinatra his first on-screen kiss. She likes to say that. And she worked with Jimmy Stewart, just all the big actors. And my dad came out of vaudeville from New York. He grew up in Brooklyn, and he was in vaudeville for years. He moved out to Los Angeles. They both met on a set, walking around one of the back lots, and got married, and here I am.
Were they supportive of your acting career initially?
My father was not, but my mother was. She was very supportive.
Super.
You know, my father just wanted me to go to college and do that kind of stuff.
Which I think is how most dads track, you know.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But my mom said, just do whatever you want. And I started making a living at it, and then my dad slowly came around, you know.
A little bit of success never hurts.
Yeah. Yeah.
When I noticed, I was looking at your credits, and the vast majority of stuff in the first 5 or 6 years was a lot of TV appearances. And you were also doing summer stock as well. Were you doing those things simultaneously?
Well, I started working in the theater, working a light and sound board for a wonderful Tony-winning Lort theater company called South Coast Repertory. They've won several Tonys as a regional theater. And so I started there working the light and sound board, and auditioned. My first play was Joseph Heller's We Bombed in New Haven in 1969.
Oh, wow.
And we had a great run with that, and I stayed. I did Mother Earth with them. I did Tommy with them. I did a bunch of plays with them. And then I had a run in the military, came back and went to school and continued my television thing. I think I did a couple things when I was young. As a kid, 11, 12, I worked with Eastwood in a Rawhide.
Oh, wow.
I think I did a couple episodes of a day player with my mom on the Masons, Perry Mason. But never really got into working in theater or film until I was much older, 20, 21 years old. And my first big break was working with Yaphet Kotto, that we all know from Alien and so many things he's done, and David Jansen, whom you may know or not know. The Fugitive, yeah. The original Fugitive. Yeah. And that was called Night Chase, I think was the name of the TV movie. And that was my big break. Then I worked with Ann Baxter, and then finally Carrie.
Oh, yeah, The Late Liz.
The Late Liz, yeah.
Yeah, I haven't seen it, but Ann Baxter.
We don't need to see that.
That's too bad. We're horror fans. We're used to things being less than great and still loving them.
I've done a lot of the less than great films.
But you're always solid in them, and that's what counts. One of the other things that I was absolutely stunned to see you in was Orson Welles' last movie, The Other Side of the Wind. I don't know if you've seen this on Netflix. It was Orson Welles' film. It had been hours and hours of film, had been in the can for years, decades, and then finally Jim Borowski, I think, assembled them and put out for Netflix the last movie of Orson Welles. And it's a very small part.
My billing was Man in the Bathroom.
What was it? Did you? I mean, obviously it wasn't a big part, but did you get to work with Wells?
No. I was just in the bathroom. I did meet him. Yeah. I was the man in the stall, I think, in the bathroom.
You do a nice double take, is what goes on.
Yeah, there you go.
You do a good eye roll.
But I was very young at the time, and a friend of mine was one of the camera operators.
Oh, wow.
And he got me in. And I walked to Mr. Wells' home, knocked on the door, and I heard like click, click, chains being rattled, like 5 or 6 locks, and the door opened like this. And I said, "Yes." And I said, "I'm here to work on the film." And he said, "Around back." And shut the door. And then so we walked into the back.
Oh my God.
That's as close as I got to working with Orson.
That's great. You kind of came of age as a film actor at kind of a really exciting time in cinema and it's interesting because I think in a way you're an interesting representative of that schism because you had parents who were very much involved in what was considered, studio player status and the old guard studio system, but yet you were a peer of Jack Nicholson and Martin Scorsese. I mean, you were the same general demographic, and you were starting to work with some of these people who were part of that new guard of Hollywood. It seems like it would have been a pretty exciting time. I mean, what was it like for you as an actor, in this environment where you had people like Bob Rafelson and Brian De Palma, who you auditioned for successfully,
yeah.
And George Lucas. What was the atmosphere like as a young actor working in Hollywood at that time?
Well, I pretty much I was playing around, playing music on the weekends at some clubs, and with friends and whatnot. Actually, Al Jarreau was playing on one of the nights. I was playing on Wednesday nights, and Al was playing on Friday and Saturday nights.
Wow.
At one club in particular. And I was working in the theater a lot. I was in a class with Gordon Hunt was teaching. Gordon Hunt was the casting director at the Mark Taper Forum, a very prestigious theater company in Los Angeles. And I did 4 plays at the Taper and worked with him. So I was, and not all leads. I mean, I was doing supporting roles, and one of the plays I was doing an understudy in The Shadow Box, which won a Pulitzer Prize, and Too Much Johnson, and then doing auditions like all the young actors, and which leads me to Carrie and auditioning for Brian De Palma and George Lucas. What you must know, although I was lucky enough to get on the added special thing that they put on the video box some years later, I famously got to audition with Kurt Russell, and he blew it for me. I told him this. I said, "You blew it for me, man. I could have been Luke Skywalker."
It would have been very, I'm sure many of you have probably seen the footage on YouTube. I mean, the footage of your audition reel. And I watched it. I actually saw a bootleg VHS of it, many, many years ago. And one of the things that impressed me about it is I thought you would have done a very interesting take on the role of Luke Skywalker, because I think there's an inherent kind of groundedness and intelligence to your approach as an actor that would have put a very different spin on the role. It would have been really interesting to see you in the part.
I told George, I said, it would be interesting if my hair came alive. It would disembody from because my hair was so big,
It's an impressive perm, or just an impressive mane of hair.
I think that blew it for me.
That and Kurt Russell.
Yeah.
Go for it.
But I was lucky enough in those auditions. They held them simultaneously. They were looking at every young up-and-coming actor and actress.
Yeah.
Carrie famously got the part.
Yeah.
But they looked at so many young actresses and actors, and I was lucky enough to get, I guess you could call it a booby prize, to play Tommy in Carrie. I don't know. I felt very good about it, and we all had a very nice career as a result of that film.
Yeah,
it was De Palma's seminal film. It really put De Palma on the map, I think.
Well, and I think you made a very good point about how many careers it ignited too. I mean, between yourself, Sissy Spacek, Nancy Allen,
who married De
John
Palma,
Travolta.
John. Well, John was already doing well.
That's
true.
John
was already, his first season of Welcome Back, Kotter had already been on, so he was already.
But as a film star, though, in a motion picture, that was a big deal.
That's true.
And it was a great movie, so I think that was good momentum for all of you. And I know the next 3 or 4 years after that for you were absolutely crazy busy.
Yeah.
But let's actually focus a little bit on Carrie. What was the experience working on it like? Tommy is one of my favorite characters in the movie because there's a legitimate conflict going on in him between the practical jokiness of what they're going to do and him gradually feeling a lot of empathy for Carrie. What was it like? How much of that was you? How much of that was De Palma? What was your take on creating that character?
Well, I think always, all the roles that I have done that I'm really known for have always been the guy. I always play the truth, and I play the guy in the middle. Truthful in an absurd situation. And I felt, that was true in House, it was true in Greatest American Hero, and it was true starting essentially with Carrie. Because you see him, a good example of that is when I'm sitting between Amy Irving and I forget the other girl.
PJ Souls?
PJ Souls comes, and I'm stuck, and I'm trying to be the guy in the middle and just get along. And maybe it comes because I was the middle child between two sisters, right? And two actors. So I had to live in a household with two big egos, right? And so I was always trying to, the sand was always moving under my feet. So you just try to keep your balance. And that's what I was trying to do in Carrie, was keep my balance and have some integrity as that character. And I did the same thing in House. I did the same thing in The Greatest American Hero. There was this guy given a suit, and he's just trying to keep his balance and have some integrity and keep his dignity. I think that's been my stock and trade, really.
That's a very good point. I really think that is a thread through a lot of the characters you play. What was De Palma like as a director?
Brian was relatively quiet if you met him. He wasn't a chatty fellow, but he was very shrewd and perceptive. He really listened intently. And we rehearsed for about 2 weeks in his apartment in Hollywood on Fountain Boulevard. And it was old, so they didn't have video cameras, but he had a tape recorder. And it was the old reel-to-reel tape recorder with little reels in there. And we would sit around his apartment and go over the scenes, Amy and I in particular, and Sissy and I. I never really had a scene with John, with Travolta. And he would make, as we would sit and improvise the scene and based on the text that was already written there, great text, he would make small changes. And then we would work on timing a little bit. And then, oh, by the way, let me digress for 1 second. You go back, you walk into his apartment, he had 3x5 cards, all of pictures of what he was going to shoot, all over his apartment. And he'd take one card down here, and he'd put it back over here. He'd take this card down here, he'd put it over here. So in his head, he was already putting the puzzle pieces together, how he was going to shoot. Now I'll go on. So anyway, to continue, we would rehearse. He made changes to the script, and by the time we got to the set, he pretty much was done working with the actors by and large. He knew that he had done the work. He felt comfortable with our performances, what we were going to give, and he was really all about the camera and the lenses and the production values in the shot. You know, where is the mic going to go? Where is this going to go? Where's that? What color are you wearing? What are we going to do here? How is the light painting this picture for this scene to create the mood that he wanted to paint? And then the coolest thing about him was, after a good example was when I go to Sissy at to ask her for the date, and there was a screen door. She opens the door and it's me there. I'm just giving one example. He would let the camera continue to roll. He wouldn't say cut. We'd finish the dialogue that was there in the scene, and he wouldn't cut, because he wanted to see what the actors were going to come up with in the next minute. And that's where I got to do a lot of my improvising, so to speak. When she shuts the door and I go, okay. You know, so little things like that he did with lots of actors. He gave that freedom to his actors to show some of them themselves. And that's what I loved about working with him.
Yeah, and it's just, the movie's so rich psychologically. I mean, each of these characters is you know, I mean, I think of all the characters besides Carrie, I think that Tommy's journey is, to me at least, the most interesting one, because he's starting off being your, you know, a nicer version, but your typical jock, mm-hmm. and then he starts to find this humanity as he gets to know this person, and then that's what makes it so dramatically crushing when the pig's blood comes down and you fall by the wayside.
Well, I think that was really, as a filmmaker, what he did is he let the audience fall in love with Tommy. And Carrie started, as you see in the when she was at the prom, we started to dance and start to have a nice time. And here's this young girl who's been badgered by all her schoolmates, and she's finally having a nice time. She's starting to really enjoy Tommy, and Tommy's starting to go, oh my God, she's a really nice girl. And minutes later, boom. I should have known, you know, when I read the script. Oh, they're falling in love. He's gonna die.
But it's powerful movie.
Yeah.
One thing that you said earlier that really kind of struck me, because again, it's a trademark of your roles, is playing a character that has a core of truth and is speaking truth, and is kind of like a stabilizing, truthful force in the lives of the people around them. And I really think that Big Wednesday is the epitome of that. And that's another, Big Wednesday is a drama that was directed by John Milius, really a labor of love on his part. Mm-hmm. And it's one of those movies that, even though it isn't like 100% work 100% of the time, it's a swing for the fences. Mm-hmm. And the ensemble work between you and Gary Busey and Jan Michael Vincent is first rate, and the character that you play, Barlow, goes through a hell of a transformation. What was working on that film like?
Well, what was interesting is that we were all, Jan and Gary and I, we're all pretty much those characters. You
really get that sense, yeah.
Yeah, Gary is like batshit.
Oh, really?
but crazy like a fox. He's like a walking encyclopedia. He's much smarter than anyone knows. And Jan Michael was he was very much that character. A real troubled individual. And Jack Barlow, the character that I played, was kind of the most conservative of those three characters. He goes into the service, he stands up, he has a lot of integrity, a lot of dignity. One of his famous lines is when he was leaving, he says, "I'm leaving for Vietnam," and I turned and I said, "You take care of these people." And that was kind of the character. And he gets in, he grows up, he comes back after they bury one of their friends who was killed in Vietnam at the graveyard scene. They all go their separate ways. John Haddis, Gary goes one way, Jan goes another, and I go another way. And that's pretty much what we did in our lives as well.
It's a really solid piece of work, and I think one of the things that really struck me watching it again for the first time in many years is how much your character doesn't just change with a mustache and a uniform. I mean, you really get a sense of that character's demeanor and their groundedness, and the fact that they've come through this hellacious situation, but there's still some resolve there. Also, it looks like you did you do like your surfing?
I did a fair amount of my surfing.
Because you're like one of the three that I see on a board.
Jan surfed. Gary didn't surf. Jan was a good surfer, and I had grown up surfing, so that was it was great for me. A wonderful thing about that is my dad used to say when I was growing up, "You can't make a living with your surfboard." When I did that film, I said, "Dad,
hold my beer." And actually, not too long after that, you had another really impressive, high-profile project, which was Butch and Sundance, the early days, which is a really entertaining riff on what Newman and Redford created initially. What was that like?
Well, Tom Berenger, who starred in it along with me, who's gone on to do Platoon and so many other wonderful projects. Wonderful actor. He and I both didn't want to do it because we thought that there was. We both felt that publicly we'd be thought of as trying to undermine the iconic stars of Paul Newman and Robert Redford.
Riding on coattails, that sort of thing.
Right. But finally, we met with Richard Lester, who famously directed the Beatles movies, and he really convinced us it was going to be a different type of Western. It was going to be a Victorian Western, as he calls it. And if no one has seen it, it actually is a Victorian Western, and it has a great sense of humor to it.
I think that's part of the. It doesn't feel like a carbon copy of the first one at all. And I think one of the things that really, I think you and Berenger both work nicely in it because neither one of you is trying to imitate your predecessor.
No.
It just feels like you're tapping into the spirit of those characters.
We Tom and I got lucky enough. We got many years later. We worked in a John Milius film called Teddy Roosevelt's Rough Riders.
Oh wow!
That was a mini series for Showtime, which is now gone. But that was fun with Sam Elliott and Gary Busey and Berenger and me. There was all just wonderful time. 4 months in Texas. It was really, really fun. A lot of guns and smoking cigars and drinking some whiskey periodically every day.
And also, getting back to Butch and Sundance, a great cast, constellation of character actors.
I can't remember all of them, but all the actors in there, Brian Dennehy, I'm trying to think.
Jeff Corey,
Peter
Weller.
John, Peter Weller went on to do well. Everybody in that cast you would recognize from their later films. They went on to be stars.
Yeah, and it's a lot of fun. I think it's very much its own animal, and I'm sad that it seems like the expectations that were set up were contrary to what the movie delivered, which the movie delivered in a good way what it should have, which is being its own animal and basically giving you kind of a really nice, breezy intro to those two characters.
Yeah, it was
And
nice. I think we had the. I think we were the first prequel. I'm not sure, but I think we were the first prequel.
Absolutely, yeah. And not too long after that, though, you started on The Greatest American Hero. And yes, please, kudos. Everyone, who doesn't love that show? I mean,
This was my audition for Hero. Can you do this? I said, yeah, I can do that. He said, you got the job.
He's got the part.
Yeah.
And you got to work with the guy who I think was probably a visionary as far as television goes, which was Stephen J. Cannell.
Oh, brilliant guy.
What was he like? What was your initial meeting with him like?
He was as fun and lovely a gentleman. Other than my father, he was the highest watermark in my life, other than my own father. Just an incredible gentleman, brilliant writer, wonderful producer, so talented and gracious. I was doing a play in New York at the time with Diana Wiest, who we all know from Edward Scissorhands and so many other things. I was playing her brother on stage at the Phoenix Rep, and we had been joined by a cast from the Guthrie Theater, famous theater at the Guthrie. And we were playing a brother and sister involved in an incestuous relationship, a Michel Tremblay play called Bonjour la Bonjour. And Stephen flew, because I had turned down the script, because I said I didn't want to do television. I was very happy in New York doing theater. And my agent said, well, Steve Cannell would like to fly out and take you to dinner. So he came out, and after a matinee, we went out to dinner, and I fell in love with the guy. I just fell in love with this guy. And I said, well, because he had he was very gregarious, and he had a very, very hearty laugh that made you just fall in love with him. And I said, well, what about this suit? Thanks. And what about this suit? And he said, oh, we don't want to talk about that. That's all right. Don't worry about that. I go, okay. And I agreed to do the show. And then, so the night after we finished the play in New York, my hair was brown, so I had to go have it dyed right away back to my normal color, which was blonde. And I'd get on the set, and he'd come out and say, oh, your hair looks great. And I go, Steve, I wanted to talk to you about this, the costume, because I haven't seen it all. He'd go, oh, don't worry about that, Bill. Don't worry about that. We'll get to that. You're going to love it. And what's funny is if you watch the pilot, there's a scene where Ralph puts it on for the first time, and he comes and looks in the mirror, and he goes, hey, sailor. And they kept it in the script. Of course, I would have been canceled nowadays. But Steve was great because he let me, we were pretty true to whatever the script was, but he also gave his actors the leeway to do some improvising and to add some own dialogue, so it would sound like it would come out of our mouths.
Yeah.
And I learned a tremendous amount working on that show, and with the late great Robert Culp.
Oh yeah.
Who was marvelous. And what people don't know is Robert Culp thought of himself first as a writer, then he thought of himself as a director, and then he thought of himself as an actor lastly. And I learned so much about script writing from Bob, because we did a lot of rewriting on those scripts. Not the intent of the scene, we never changed plot, but we would always rewrite scenes so that the words would sound like they came out of our mouths. And there was a truthfulness and authenticity, and it was never stretched. And it was marvelous. And of course, working with the wonderful Connie Selica, who was just so delightful to be with.
Yeah, one of the things that I've always really thought about the show for a lot of years is with the Marvel Universe kind of taking all of its different tonal shifts, it really feels like Ralph Hinckley is one of the earliest reluctant superheroes with an element of humor threaded through his dealing with things. and that feels like it had a pretty big lateral influence on things like Marvel's Ant-Man movies and the more comical Thor films. I really see Ralph Hinckley as kind of a precursor to this.
Yeah, I think I should get paid for all that.
Amen. So, but yeah, that was 5 years. So for a working actor, that's like the penultimate to have a 5-year steady gig.
Yeah.
What else do you feel what did being a regular on a long running TV show, how did that what did you learn from that?
It's exhausting. What people don't know is it's exhausting. Up usually at 5 o'clock in the morning, driving to wherever the location was, and in the makeup chair by 6:30 at the latest, on set by 8. You'd get to shoot maybe 1 or 2 scenes for lunch. And then in between scenes, while you're shooting one scene, you're reading lines and memorizing for the next scene that's coming up, right? And then you'd finish by maybe 8, 9 o'clock that night, take an hour drive home, get up the next day, look at scripts, look at your scripts, come back the next day, and then on the weekends they want you to fly off and do promotion. So it's exhausting. It's truly exhausting. I don't know how these guys do it. Nowadays, there's a lot of ensemble shows, so they share the workload amongst lots of people.
But yeah, and that's a good point, because back then, 70s and 80s, with television shows, you did not have a lot of ensemble work. There was always one person at the center,
right.
And when you're shouldering that's a lot of damn work.
Stuff, yeah.
A lot of work. Also around at least the beginning of The Greatest American Hero, you were also you had also done. There was the Canadian television adaptation of Pippin that was shown in 1981. Lovely work.
Thank you.
Gave you a chance to flex your musical muscles, as it were.
Yeah.
What was that experience like?
Well, great. I had auditioned for Bob Fosse many times before that.
And that's the other thing.
And
Bob Fosse.
he's iconic in the theater world.
Yeah.
And I had auditioned for him many times in the theater world, and I remember when I was called to audition for him in LA again, I walked into the room at the Sophie Hotel, and I said, there was the accompanist, there's always a keyboard accompanist there with him, and I said, Mr. Fosse, do I have to audition for you again? He said, no, kid, you got the job. and that was great.
What was he like as a creative collaborator?
Awesome. This is Bob Fosse. I can do it. I can do it. He would sit in a chair like this with a cigarette hanging out of his mouth. That's Bob Fosse. And I was always jealous because when we were doing it, we were rehearsing at the Broadway Arts on 57th in New York. And God, he had this beautiful 19-year-old co-ed that was his girlfriend at the time. And this fucker was like 50. I'm going, how do you do it?
That is so Bob Fosse.
Yeah.
It was just like so Bob Fosse.
I know, it was so great. But he was not supposed to be and he was never credited officially with directing. But he was there he came to the first day of rehearsal, he never left.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
So very hands-on.
Kathy, his assistant, was supposed to be directing, doing all the choreography. I didn't know how to dance at the time. I was an actor who could move. And the wonderful Ben Vereen came in on 2 Sundays in a row on his days off to teach me that wonderful dance that we do on stage called a right track.
Oh my God. You got dance lessons from Ben Vereen.
I know.
That's
a Tony
amazing.
Award winner, you know?
Wow.
I got to work with Cheetah Rivera, who was in that production, another Tony Award winner.
I tell you.
And I didn't win one. Again!
Oh, and it's, now that we're talking about musical endeavors, I know you had a major label record out in the early mid-'80s, Secret Smiles. And I know I've seen other interviews where you've talked about your passion for music, but that it's kind of more of a...
It's a hobby,
of a tension releaser for you.
Yeah, it's tension release. It's a hobby. I sing in the showers. I've played with the jazz trio for years. But it's just fun. It's a hobby. Instead of bowling, I go out and play with the guys,
And that's the way it should be.
Yeah.
Let's jump forward a couple of years to House, and let's talk a little bit about that, because it's one of my favorite movies of your career, and I know that a lot of you probably agree. I think it's a lot of fun, crazy tonal shifts, but you provide the focus, you provide the center, and it works.
Yeah.
What was that experience?
Well, it was pretty cool. Steve Miner, you know, when I read the script, I was flabbergasted because it was really, really fun. And Steve Miner had come out of some wonderful horror films, and the word was on the street was at the time, this guy is going to break out. It was the same thing as Was De Palma. It was the same buzz. He's going to break out, and it was a seminal film for Steve Miner.
Yeah.
You know, and the humor in that film was pretty much I was just streaming Steve Miner's sense of humor, and we had just so much fun. We laughed every single frickin' day, and it was old school. It was old school effects.
Oh yeah.
You know, with the tools coming after me. Well, they had this frickin' thing rigged up with wires and all these things, and they move it like this, right? Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't see that today. It would all be, CGI.
Yeah.
You know, but it made it a lot of fun.
Oh, I would imagine, and I would imagine interacting with all those insane practical effects creatures must have been something.
Yeah. One of my, yeah, it's fun. You know, the guy is showing me the house, and then harpoon goes off and just barely misses my head. That was hysterically funny. You know.
Well, and it's and again, timing is everything in comedy, and that's what really, between you and George Wendt, there's a lot of really good comic energy coming out of
Yeah,
that.
he's great.
Yeah. What was Wendt like as a?
Oh my God! Well, he's got such a dry sense of humor.
Yeah.
You know. There's a great scene that he does when we first meet, and he's talking about, because my aunt hangs herself, the woman. He said, "Oh yeah, yeah. She was a really, really weird, strange woman, horrible. Oh my God!" And I go, "She was my aunt." And he goes, "Yeah, but heart of gold, wonderful woman. You know, just doesn't miss a beat. He turns it like that."
Yeah, it's a great comic performance.
Yeah, and George Wendt is fun.
Yeah, and there's a reason that movie is fondly remembered. Several, actually. So we're glad you did it.
Yeah.
Another movie I wanted to touch on briefly, because I thought it was interesting, and it sounds like it was as much of an adventure for you making it as it was the movie, is Baby, The Secret of the Lost Legend.
Quite an adventure. We shot it, I'll jump in here.
Absolutely.
We shot it in West Africa, in the Ivory Coast, in the city of Abidjan. At the time, there was very seldom was there any running hot water. You couldn't get a boiled egg. You had to eat the most horrible food. And it was like triple canopy forest, the hottest, just unbelievably hot. And snakes everywhere. We had a cobra on the set one day. Sean Young and I were laying in this stream, and a green mamba crawled right over us. They said, "Don't move." And this green mamba crawled right over us, right? It was really, really crazy. I'll tell you a crazy thing that happened. This is the God's honest truth. It rained ferociously sometimes, and the roads were this red mud, right? And one of the days, one of the drivers, it was a fairly big company, was driving out to the location where we were, and the car slid off and killed one of the villagers who would walk along the road with stuff on their head, this young a gal. And 10 minutes later, we see an AD running down toward the set going, grab something, let's go. And we go, what? And way over the hill on the other side, there's like 50 of these guys welding machetes going, ah! And we go, holy fuck. So everybody is grabbing a C-stand, the cameras, and this and that, and we all loaded into the trucks and took off because they were going to kill us. And we had to drive 8 hours to get back to Abidjan. Wow. Crazy. That's a true story.
Yeah, I mean, I think you had mentioned in the interview on the Blu-ray that Bill Norton, the director, had gotten violently ill. Was
Yeah.
super sick.
Super sick, you know. He came out of the... For like a week, they were bringing him out on a stretcher. They bring him out on a stretcher like this, and then they would push him up like this. Right? Push him out, you gotta put the camera in there, just like that. And then they wheel him back down like this. He came out, and he told me, he said, "There's little green worms in my poop." Oh. We had 2 guys get malaria on that shoot, got sent back to England. Oh my God, what a shoot. And Sean Young, wow, she was interesting to work with. You know, she was a real...
You're not the first person to say that.
Yeah, she was interesting to work with. I mean, we ended up being friends. I haven't seen her in many years, but I'm glad that we got to do that film, and that it didn't turn out as... I think it was neither fish nor fowl. It wasn't for kids, it wasn't for adults. It fell somewhere in between, and it was put out just the year before Jurassic Park. So again, no CG. I think very little, you know. But so it wasn't welcomed as much as Disney had thought it would be. Oh, it was Touchstone that did it, wasn't Disney?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's wonderful that you've kept working all these years. It's always a treat to see you on TV or in a film. The most recent thing that I see on the list here of things that you've done, which I'm very intrigued by, if you could tell us a little bit about, is a movie called Pursuit that you did opposite Emile Hirsch, John Cusack. Like this year, I guess, is when it's...
I said I did a few good films, didn't I?
Sorry to be picking at something, but...
I did a great film years ago, though, we've missed, called Man from Earth.
Oh, yes.
Jerome Bixby script, who everybody is familiar with. He
Absolutely.
did a lot of stuff for Star Trek and whatnot. Wonderful script, and I always told people, low budget looking. It was shot on an old Panavision camera. The production quality was not great, but I tell people, if you watch 10 minutes, you'll watch the whole thing.
Yeah.
It's about a guy who lives for 10,000 years, and he's not a vampire, he's not undead, he doesn't know why he's alive, but he can't tell anybody because he doesn't age. So he's become a teacher, and he's decided he's moving, and finally he's going to tell somebody. So he has his friends that he's developed at school come, and he's going to divulge this information that he's who he is and why he's moving. And we're all PhDs in our field, in theology, in history, in archaeology, and we try to poke a hole in his story. I'm not going to spoil it because there's more to it than that, but it's really an interesting script. I was very proud of it.
I was actually going to ask you if there were specific films or television turns in your career that you thought needed more attention, that you feel haven't gotten as much attention, and that sounds like an effective...
It was real good. Most of the work I've done, honestly, I'm proudest of is the work I've done on stage, you know.
And what are like some of the most significant kind of... I mean, I know you did a television adaptation of The Rainmaker. With
Right.
Really
Tommy Lee
stacked
Jones,
cast.
Tuesday Weld, John Frankenheimer, yeah.
But as far as stage achievements go, what was kind of like the one that was the most satisfying, the pinnacle for you?
Well, I think Pippin was very satisfying for me. I got to work with... Did I mention this? I'm forgetting. I got to work with Marcia Norman. Did I mention this?
No.
Marcia Norman won the Pulitzer Prize for Night Mother many years ago. And I did a stage play she wrote called Sarah and Abraham, directed by Jack Hofstas, who won the Tony for Elephant Man on Broadway.
Oh, wow.
So that was marvelous. And I got to work with Jack again and do the world premiere of the Days of Wine and Roses on stage at the Cleveland Playhouse.
Oh, wow.
With wonderful actress Maya Dillon. That was one of my favorite plays that I ever did. And there's many others. You know, I got to do a national tour of the Pirates of Penzance, and a wonderful play called Smoke on the Mountain that I did in Kansas City for 6 months. Most of the theater work I've done I've been very, very proud of, because I get to use different muscles.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely. Test your versatility.
Right, not just my handsome face.
Well,
Old handsome face.
there we go. I'd like to turn this over to the audience. Does anybody have any questions for Bill?
Yes.
Yes, in the back.
Hi, so White Ghost is one of your favorite films of yours that I like, and I was in this whole era of trying to catch up with Vietnam films in the 80s, and White Ghost really stood out, and I'd love to hear if you had any stories from White Ghost.
Well, White Ghost, we shot it in I think it was 85? 84, 85, we shot it in South Africa. So that was my first time to Africa, which I've been 6 times. But that was my first time, and I went to South Africa just after. Oh no, I went to Abidjan first to shoot Baby, then the next time I went to South Africa. And the interesting thing about that is I went during apartheid. So everyone was saying, don't go, it's going to be, crazy. But I never really saw any violence personally. And I think I mentioned to you before the interesting thing on set there, because it was a Vietnam thing where I'm trying to, I'm working with Rosalind Chow, wonderful actress, and we're trying to get into this village and get somebody out, extract somebody that's been taken prisoner. And the interesting thing on the set, while there was all these fake guns and shooting whatnot, was that the grips and the electricians and the drivers and everybody else, well, everybody had a gun here, real gun.
Jeez.
So I was always worried and always wanted to double check what guns we were using on the set. So something as horrible as what happened on the Rust set recently this last year wouldn't happen. And that was one of the most interesting things there. But there was military, there was garrisons everywhere, military garrisons and checkpoints, and it was a fascinating time to be working in South Africa.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I was curious that from The Greatest American Hero, I wonder if you know about this, the chest emblem on the costume, did it have a name?
The chest, where that came from, and Steve told me this, I was sitting across the desk and he picked up his scissors. And his scissors on his desk were that emblem.
Oh, wow.
And that's the emblem he used. And I believe in Chinese, I don't know if it's Cantonese or Mandarin, but that symbol means the middle or the center.
Wow.
So, I don't know. It's an emoji on the iPhone. That's all I know.
Yes.
I'm always amazed when I go to theater to see all the lines that the people can remember in the play. Which do you find harder to do, to learn the lines in a stage play or
Oh, stage play is much harder. Yeah, but usually you get 3 or 4 weeks, sometimes 5 weeks in rehearsal to work on those lines, and which you do ferociously for a month. You learn those lines, and then you get on stage, and for 2 hours you're spewing dialogue, and there's no stopping. Whereas in film, typically in a big feature, Top Gun or one of these things, they're shooting a quarter or a half a page a day, right? Well, in television, you're shooting typically 5 to 8 pages a day, right? But 2 scenes in the morning, usually a scene or 2 scenes in the afternoon. That's the way it goes. And as I said prior, while you're doing the one scene that you've learned the night before, you're working on dialogue for your next scene that's coming up. You usually have somebody, a script supervisor you're running lines with, or you have a tape recorder and you're talking into it and you're learning on your tape recorder, right? That's the way that goes. Much harder to do theater, much harder. I remember once I was doing summer stock, Music Man in Kansas City, and I totally forgot the song 76 Trombones, right? So I forgot it. So I'm sitting and I turn to the audience and I go, oh, come on, we all know the lines, right? And I got the whole crew to start singing it and I go, woo.
Oh,
The whole audience was singing it. It was wonderful.
Well played, sir.
That's
Well
what
played.
you do in the theater. You gotta come up with the stuff right there.
Well played. Yes, you, sir.
I just recently finished watching a DC animated film and noticed your name in the credits as one of the voiceovers
Oh,
for, I think it was Green Arrow or something like that.
something like that, yeah.
I was wondering if if you were planning to do any more of that kind of work in the future, or?
The wonderful director who was doing all that. I did Animaniacs and a bunch of stuff at the WB, but she retired, and with that, a new regime and a new group of people came in, right? That's typically what happens, you know. Everybody uses their people that they count on and
Yeah.
that are their friends that they enjoy working with. So when she left, my voiceover career kind of ended.
It's a bummer. Right?
Yeah.
Did you find voice acting to be rewarding, like, as an actor?
I like working with puppets. I told you not to talk. But I like to talk.
Yes, sir.
I was just wondering, were there any roles that you kind of wish you would have took?
There's a lot of roles I wish I hadn't taken. Yes.
I was wondering, what do you like from your directors, and who's your favorite director?
Who's my favorite director? Gee whiz, I really liked working with Steve Miner. Many of the directors on Greatest American Hero I loved. And in the theater, Jack Hoffs is hands down one of the best directors I've ever worked with.
Do you just like them, just like let you run, or do you want them to like actually tell you?
Oh, no. They know when to speak up and when to let someone do their own thing. That's the secret. Yes?
What was it like to be in Carrie?
What was it like to be in Carrie? It was fun. I was 24 years old, all these young guys, young girls. We were making a living, largely, some of us, for the first time. It was just heaven. You know, that's what it was. It was fun. Yes?
Did you get to actually meet Stephen King? Or?
I did not. He came to the set one day. PJ Souls, who in Carrie wore the red hat, the baseball cap. She said he came to set one day, but I was not there. I wasn't working that day. Yes?
So you worked with John Milius a couple times, and I would just love to know, I know he's a pretty distinctive character. I'd love to know your thoughts on working with him and what that was like.
Bigger than life. John was bigger than life. Unfortunately, he had a stroke some years ago. He's made tremendous, he's had a tremendous recovery. He still doesn't have everything back. I don't think he'll ever direct. I'm not sure if he can write again. But he had 10 or 15 scripts that had all gone into turnaround, beautiful scripts. What happens in Hollywood, you write a script, you're under contract to a studio, and if they decide they're not going to shoot it, it gets put on a shelf, gets put on the turnaround, and then somebody else can buy it, another studio. But the debt that was incurred from writing that script goes along with the script that's bought. And pretty soon there's so much debt with the script that it never gets made because it's too expensive. And John had like 10 or 15 of those scripts. Oh, wow. Yeah. He wrote an amazing, his last script that I read, when he had a stroke, Gary Busey and I would sit on the bed and we read a wonderful script to him that he had written called Genghis Khan. Oh, wow. It was going to be his piece de resistance, you know, it was a magnificent opus. He never got to make it. I heard Steven Spielberg, one of his good friends, and maybe George were going to make it, but this was years ago.
Did you have a question, ma'am?
Yeah. Do you have any tips for like being in theater?
You know, there's a lot of community theater out there. That's where I would start. Community theater. And if you can't be an actress, go be an usher. Be out in front, right? Or ask to work backstage or build props, and then that's the way to do it. Yes.
I know your mom is an actress, and I'm sure everybody knows that too. Did your parents encourage or discourage you knowing the ups and downs of being an actor? Did you
Well, I think we covered that at the beginning of this. My mom was very encouraging, and my dad was not, you know.
How did that work out in the long run? Did he eventually?
My mom won.
Yes, Mad Magazine cap, sir. Yes.
Well, I loved House. I mean, I also love Greatest American Hero, etc. But I wondered what your take was on Richard Ball.
Richard Ball?
Yeah.
We never really got friendly, to be very honest. I just didn't like it. He was too tall. No, we got along well enough. And, the one marvelous scene that we did where he was dying in Vietnam, they built this beautiful set on a soundstage. The jungle scene, the Vietnam stuff, was all built on a set. It was like a mound that they had done on this giant soundstage. Gorgeous. And Richard and I had this great scene together where he's dying and he wants me to kill him, and I take my knife out and I'm going to kill him and I can't do it. And he gets so angry, and it's a very emotional scene. We spent like 2 or 3 hours working on it. And I remember at the end of it, we did all the close-ups and stuff. And in the camera, they're unloading the magazine from the camera, and it dropped on the floor and went choo, 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 like that. All the film rolled out like that, and I go, oh my, excuse me, fucking God. And we had to reshoot it, you know, and it really was, it was, I thought I had done some of my best work, which in a lot of films, all of my best work, you never see it.
Well, we're just about winding down here. Does anybody have one more question we could squeeze in?
Yes.
So what do you have anything you're working on right now, or in plans that you being?
I got a couple things that I just did a pilot, really funny, goofy pilot. I hope gets picked up. I don't know. You know, it's an ensemble cast. My dream, as I've gotten older, my dream job would to be on a series and work 1 day a week. That would be my dream job.
Right on.
Know?
Yeah.
Yes.
I was just gonna ask, what kind of roles are you looking for these days?
Anything that pays.
Yes.
Okay, thanks,
And
guys.
on that merry note, let's close things out with Katt, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being here.